Hi everyone, welcome to Tales of Dread. Since the 1960s, tales have circulated about secret installations and bases concealed under the North American environment. This week, we analyze the most notorious sites. An subterranean base at Dulce, New Mexico, is a modern-day enigma. Stopping his automobile, Gabriel Valdez looked out the driver's side window at the black bulk and swore. He briefly considered leaving the scene and ignoring what he'd witnessed. Curiosity prompted him to leave the car to validate his suspicions and worries. The patrolman sighed and radioed his position to the dispatcher before unlocking the driver's side door and made his way through the bush. He knew what he would discover before he reached the cadaver. This carcass was left like the others, according to a quick check. He saw diamond-shaped indentations sliced into the hide and numerous layers of flesh removed expertly. The creature's eyes, nose, and tongue were gone, despite no trace of animal predation. It was fairly obvious that the reproductive glands and other critical internal organs had been removed in a clean and sterile way. As he stood beside the animal's body, he saw no trails or damaged vegetation. Valdez heard a car coming. He looked up from the horrific scene and saw a camouflaged 5-ton vehicle approaching him. As the transport reached where he'd parked his police vehicle, its passengers returned his inquisitive glance before speeding away. As its dust cloud dissipated, Valdez felt confusion, fear, and anger towards those he blamed for the death of this creature, for all the slain animals he had found in recent months, and for the falsehood that their slaughter had been used to perpetuate a lie to keep local residents away from the neighboring mesa. Because he feared something there that no earthly power could protect them from. US officials forced the local Apache tribe to settle at Dulce, New Mexico, during the end of the 19th century. In one site, the area's Native American population consented, creating the Hickory, an Apache reserve around which the town would later be constructed. For the next century and a half, the people of this little backwater settlement would live in relative peace. By the late 1970s, the looming shadow cast by this towering mountain peak took on a sinister connotation with the discovery of bizarre cattle mutilations. Ranchers and farmers complained to authorities that someone was killing their animals. Gabriel Valdez is investigating. The investigator typically had more questions than answers after visiting damaged houses. Usually only one animal in targeted herds was impacted, and it was dispatched in a way that looked to devalue natural predators. Although sensory and internal organs were removed from the corpses, there was no evidence that the meat had been eaten. These corpses remained undisturbed for weeks after the catastrophe, an unheard-of occurrence in this severe climate. Officer Valdez's report noted the absence of disruption in the soft, Sunday ground around the remains, leaving no clues as to who or what was responsible for the smashed bones. His assertion that the corpses were dumped from a tremendous height led to some questions. Officer Valdez's supervisors quickly saw he had no predetermined purpose and wasn't supporting any one hypothesis about the animal fatalities. His report described everything he found throughout his inquiry and showed he had ruled out the most apparent causes of death. But circumstances rapidly unfolded, jeopardizing the investigator's ability to remain cool and objective. His community. Jerry Julian contacted the police in 1986 to tell that someone had tried to kidnap her while she slept. Julian told the investigators that the night before she and her husband had gone stargazing on Archuleta Mesa. Julian's attention was attracted to a star that appeared to be moving across the night sky. As she and her husband watched, the celestial body proceeded to descend and settle a short distance away. The dazzling light faded, exposing a metallic building with stairs. Two little creatures carefully down the metal walkway and headed toward the pair. With a startled yell, Julian's husband had seized her by the shoulders, pulled her into his truck and desperately tried to start the engine. She stared in dread at the two squat figures approaching the car while the motor wouldn't start. When the strangers were within meters from the truck's tail, reaching out to grab it, the engine started and the pair escaped. Nighttime. After deciding not to report the incident, the couple went to bed, but Julian woke up with an odd pulling feeling. Looking down at the bottom of her bed, she saw two dark creatures similar to those she had seen emerge from the odd ship earlier that night. She felt her covers being pushed off the bed to reveal her lower body. Julian tried to scream but only made hoarse and raspy noises. This wail woke her sleeping spouse. Two people then disappeared. Julian stated the existence of these things was general knowledge among natives when questioned by federal authorities. She described a massive hole bored deep into the rock face, buried higher up the mesa, that she said the monsters used to reach the surface. At the same time the investigators were taking record, Julian's statement independent reports of an extraterrestrial base hidden under Archuleta Mesa were made. A local merchant told Kirtland Air Force Base security he had recorded odd activity above and below the mountains. Base top officers knew Paul Benowitz. After he reported weird lights over his Albuquerque house, they investigated. He said he has caught unusual energy releases and radio signals from under the May. Sir? The businessman also flew his own plane around the highlands, shooting everything he thought unusual. He was welcomed into the base to talk in person. He showed them photographs of rock pathways and doors far from any road or highway. He generated maps of purported events and access locations and reported interviews with livestock owners and people who claim to have been taken near the mesa. As Benowitz added more information to his ad hoc briefing, his audience lost faith in him. He panicked after hearing from mysterious government sources that the extraterrestrials under the mountain were one of 3 species to visit Earth. But his claim that an entire level of the supposed extraterrestrial facility had vats of human organs and body parts got him mocked and taken from the site. The businessman's mental health and coherence decline. He panicked. Doctor recommended. His family applied to have him committed to a psychiatric facility in 1988, removing any shred of credibility his initial reports to the military may have contained. But perhaps the most amazing aspect of Paul Benowitz's stories is that they are by no means the only such detailed allegations of a secret base concealed beneath the town of Dulce. In the mid-1990s, a former Air Force technician by the name of Thomas Costello went public confiding that Costello stated this was not an extraterrestrial facility but a US government base where aliens and human scientists conduct genetic experimentation. Costello was a U.S. Air Force photographer located in Las Vegas, but moved to Dulce in New Mexico in the 1970s. He maintained the facility's monitoring network and documented lab work. Costello offered photographic evidence of what he claimed was an alien hybrid suspended in a vat of fluid in one of the labs, but journalists barely had time to digest his claims that the Dulce base was just one of many such facilities linked by a vast underground railroad network before he disappeared. Later, a whistleblower from inside the Dulce Police Department resurfaced his charges. Former tribal police officer Avery Tafoya found the federal investigators' report while studying Jerry Julian's testimony. Unbelievably, they contained precise plans of a vast military complex where Julian said the mountain entrance located. The base's plans showed 7 floors of housing, storage, and labs. It had an underground railway network, as Thomas Costello said. Armed with this knowledge, Tafoya said he had tried to ascend the mountain and inspect the facilities for himself, but was thwarted by bad weather each time. Using a thermal camera, he documented unusual openings and vents in the mountain's granite and captured what sounded like massive machinery operating under the slopes. The US military has gone to considerable pains to deny that Dulce Base exists or is part of a network of subterranean facilities, and it seems part of their tactic has been to damage the credibility of individuals making the accusations. The background of Thomas Costello remains uncertain, with attempts to locate and review his military service records suggesting he never existed. Photos associated with his testimony have proven to be forgeries, and no formal interview with him has ever been unearthed. Members of the intelligence community have also admitted to deliberately feeding false information to Paul Benowitz. The Air Force created Dulce to distract the businessman. They claim to have put phony equipment and air vents on Archuleta Mesa for him to photograph to distract him from real military facilities. Gabriel Valdez has never believed reports of an alien facility on the Mesa. Before his death in 2011, the former police officer informed his son that people, not aliens, harmed the animals near the town. He mentioned 1960s nuclear testing in New Mexico and said livestock were discreetly tested for radiation sickness. There are comprehensive arguments for and against the existence of a facility under Archuleta Mesa, and the hidden work being done there. With so many claims, it's hard to tell which sources to believe. It is not beyond all conceivable that the US government is in possession of secret subterranean military camps created deep away from prying eyes, but at the same time, some of the claims related to them appear so ludicrous that they drive any thought of their existence into derision. Throughout this episode, we have avoided the most detailed and impassioned evidence for an underground structure at Dulce, a man who claimed he was a former worker at the secretive site and had survived a horrifying battle between human and extraterrestrial forces during the excavation of the eventual facility there. Join us next week, as we study the evidence of one Phil Schneider bedtime tale.